Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I am here with my actual coach and friend, Lorna Wilson. Hey, Lorna, how are you today?
I am great. How are you?
So good. It's so much fun for me to be able to interview you on this podcast because we have been working together personally as a coach and coachee. You've been coaching me, which for everyone listening, coaches need coaches too. And I think all good coaches appreciate the value of coaching. Otherwise, we wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, I just feel like I need a little tune-up. And this year I thought I could really use some support from Lorna, especially in this area that we're going to talk about on the podcast today, unhooking from criticism and praise. And I've been working with Lorna. We're almost done our coaching engagement, and it's just been so transformative for me. So I feel very, very grateful that you're here today, Lorna.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to just introduce Lorna, and then we're going to get going. So Lorna's journey as a life coach began with a story of courage and resilience. As a young widow, she learned early on that navigating life is certainly not always easy, but it's our life experiences that can make us stronger and more determined to create a better future. Drawing on this strength, Lorna became a certified professional life coach, and that's through CTI, right, Lorna?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
the thing. It's called Coactive Training Institute now.
Yeah.
But yeah, Coaches Training Institute.
And that's the same school that I was trained in,
Yes.
in between my nutrition program, my nutrition certification, and my TNMI certification. So we have that in common.
Mm-hmm.
So Lorna became a certified professional life coach using her personal journey to help countless women on their paths to personal growth and fulfillment. Her passion for helping people reevaluate their relationship with alcohol led her to become a certified alcohol-free coach. So we also have that in common, where she helps women achieve a healthier, happier lifestyle by ending the conflict between their conscious desire to drink less and their unconscious belief that alcohol is beneficial. Lorna's career experience in managing nonprofit organizations and leadership roles in local government has given her a unique perspective on the challenges facing leaders and individuals in public service. She understands how those challenges can take you in a direction where you're no longer in alignment with your true calling. And that's why she's committed to helping her clients navigate the twists and turns of life, rediscover their true purpose, and unlock their full potential. And you'll find out more about Lorna at lornawilsoncoaching.com. And I'm sure we'll come back to that at the end of the episode. But Lorna's here today to talk about the very thing that she's been coaching me on. So the story really is that I didn't know that much about this area of coaching. It's not something, I mean, I've certainly have supported women around this, but not in the way that Lorna does. So not with the methodology or the approach that Lorna uses, which is, originates, I think, a lot of it, Lorna, out of the CTI training, the Coactive Training Institute training that you and I both have.
Yeah.
But then more specifically from a program that was created by a woman called Tara Mohr, M-O-H-R, who wrote a book called Playing Big, which is a fabulous book if you are listening. And this podcast episode is right up your street. Check out that book because it's really great. So Lorna, did you get certified or somehow you trained through Tara Mohr with Tara Mohr's approach as well?
Yeah, I've just loved her approach and her work for a long time. And Tara herself was trained through CTI, which I didn't find out until after I'd actually read the book. But her approach to playing big and helping women was just something that really resonated with me. Mm-hmm. And so I read the book. I started to incorporate some of the things within my coaching practice. And then she offers a couple of different programs. One's called the Coaching Way, and the other one is for facilitating facilitators course. So it's not like a certification per se, right, but you go through and you understand the methodology a lot more, and you can certainly speak to it more effectively. And it's a really well done course, and I just loved every moment of it. So
Yeah. And I loved reading this book, even though, and maybe one of the things I loved the most about it is that it all made total sense to me, both as a woman who has, spent a large portion of her life feeling like an imposter and a fraud and struggling with criticism and, looking for praise more than she wants to look for praise. And also as a coach trained in the CTI methodology, because so much of that is present in the book. And again, when I learned this was something that you sort of specialized in, I thought, ooh, you're the perfect person, because as I've said to you many times before, you're exactly the opposite of who I am in so many ways. You're so calm and I just thought,
you can be calm too. I've heard you be calm.
I can be calm, but I liked that balance for me, because I tend to, especially about this stuff, I tend to get, quite excited. And I thought this would be a really nice partnership. And so far it's been fabulous. So let's talk about, I'd love to start with your story, because I know there's a personal aspect of this for you, this whole unhooking ourselves from criticism and praise, which is really about making that, I guess, less of a driving factor in how we see ourselves and how we go about going through this world, right?
Yeah, I think for me, the story goes back to, when I was younger, and and that, that whole notion of being kind of the quiet kid, in grade school, and always wanted to be a bit of the good girl, always wanting to find a way to fit in and be liked, which is common. But our family was one where there was no praise really over anything. It was just kind of one of those unspoken things that you don't brag, and you don't, yes, that's great that you did well, but you can do even better next time, that kind of thing. And so that's where the story kind of begins. And so when I started to read and understand, about praise and criticism from the view within this book, it really, really resonated with me, because I think my whole entire career, this was a theme throughout it all the time. I did not, I had a number of things happen within my life that were unexpected. I did not go to, formal university and get a degree. And so right off the mark, I always thought to myself, oh man, you're just not quite smart enough. And, I'd find myself in rooms with academics and stifled to figure out, well, what am I going to say, and that sort of thing. So it just kind of starts there, of trying to figure out a way to fit in. When my husband passed away in 1983, and my daughter was 2.5, and I wasn't working or anything at that particular time. So I had to immediately get a job, because there wasn't any insurance and all of that. And, I landed a really great job. I actually was in a radio station.
Oh, wow. I
Which is
didn't
a
know that.
story for another day, Wendy. I can tell you about.
Just tell me a tiny bit. What were you doing there?
Well, I did a number of things, actually. First of all, I was just merely reception, but I grew within that company as well, and actually became a community liaison. And I worked with a radio station with nonprofit groups, actually, which was really hilariously fun. I also was one of the very few females that was in the radio station at the time. And one of my fun stories is the day that a guy came out of the control room, and he says, "We need a female voice. We need a female voice." And it was a car commercial. I had one line in it or something like that, which of course got played then later at their Christmas party. But yeah, so who knew, right?
That's great.
But the nonprofit, I left there actually and moved on, and eventually worked for a large business improvement area, which actually is a nonprofit. And so that's lots of retailers, and overseeing sort of a downtown area. And it was a job where I grew into it. So I was learning as I went along. But a lot of it was about being likable. A lot of it was about building relationships and getting people to get along with one another, particularly in an environment like that. We had to get along with our municipal council, et cetera, and all sorts of things. So I was always in that role of, being the nice person, coming in, calming the waters, figuring things out, all of that. Ultimately, I moved on and I did get into local government. And again, the job started to, I excelled within the roles. And eventually I got into, a role just near the end of my career where it was a lot of demands, a lot of, a lot of, again, working with nonprofits, lots of arts groups and that were struggling, and having to be a spokesperson both to them and then also to council, going in and trying to, defend what groups were looking for. And on the other hand, serve, what the needs were from the municipal standpoint. So it was a lot of negotiating, that sort of thing. And I was just, to be frank, out of my element lots of times. Mm-hmm. On the outside, though, no one would know that. My job, I did well with it. I received great performance evaluations. It went well. Inside, I was dying.
Right.
Because when criticism happened, which it would inevitably, so there would be a newspaper article. I can remember being on television and having to defend something that we were going for, some funding that we were asking for, and having the reporter with the microphone in my face, and getting off of that particular media interview and having him, someone come up to me saying, "Oh my goodness, your face was so red," and inside that the criticism, when it would happen, would just take me out for days, but no one would ever know that,
Right. Yeah.
No one would ever know that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. That's kind of the, some of the threads that are within this story of criticism and praise.
And it's so common, that story. Like when we were coaching together and we were talking through sort of where this started for me, it wasn't that dissimilar to you. I think it's a really common experience, especially for women, mm-hmm. especially for girls. And that's one of the things that I think is the most interesting about Tara Moore's book is what she talks about, sort of why that is, why we are so hooked on criticism and praise. And I'm not going to do it justice, and you may be able to put some more meat on the bones at this point. But the truth is, our worth, we had no way of valuing independent worth as women for a very long time, socially mm-hmm. and historically. And so, mm-hmm. We weren't making money, we weren't the breadwinners, we weren't the builders, we weren't doing the things. We were, homemakers, moms, that type of thing. And so, of course, we got hooked on praise. Mm-hmm. Of course, we got overly sensitive to criticism if those were the things that were actually defining our worth and our value for us. Anyway,
and trying to fit in. And trying to fit in. It was like a lifeline, so she talks about how, for millennium, we had a reliance on others. In order to feel safe, be safe, exactly. Financially secure, legally secure, etc. And when I also, when I read that, I'm going, wow, okay, that's where things may
because begin, we couldn't piss anyone off because that would potentially jeopardize our safety. And so we got really good at being the peacemakers, at being the brokers, at being the nice person, at being the good girl. Like it was so interesting to me from a sort of sociological perspective when I read that. Mm-hmm. But, oh yeah, that makes so much sense to me. And so many of the women that I work with are caught up in this, in the way that I was caught up in it and you were caught up in it. What I can see rationally as an irrational over response to criticism. I can mm-hmm. see it, rationally, I'm a smart person. I can see that the way that I'm responding to a small comment, for example, that somebody makes on social media, or some, an email that I get from someone, or a conversation that I have. And sometimes people don't even need to say things. I just assume that there's criticism there. I think we're really doing that, right? Yeah. And I can see rationally, I can see that it's an overreaction, that it's out of proportion, that it's not serving me, but it doesn't mean I do anything different with it. I still have that very big response and reaction to it, and it can take me down. Now, I'm doing much better because of the coaching that I'm doing with you. But I did want to come clean. This is something that I struggle with. And when you were talking about what it was like to be in the government role, I was thinking back to when I was a lawyer, and this is really when this just was at an all-time high for me, I have to admit. And I would show up for work every day, and I think today's the day. They're gonna realize I don't actually know what they think I know. I'm not actually as good as they think I am. Like, the other shoe is going to drop. I'm going to get found out. And I felt like that every single day I practiced law. Same thing. Really good at my job. Got amazing performance reviews. Got moved up the ladder at a great pace. Was offered partnership after 7 years of practice. All of that stuff. I still felt that way every single day I walked into that building. And it's really, really interesting. And then, so that's like let's talk about like how we get hooked on it. So how we get to a place where it's actually something that we can see it oftentimes, like I could, but we can't figure out how to let go of it. How do we get there? And how does that?
Yeah. Well, I think some of the things that Tara talks about in the book too, about where the genesis of where some of this comes from, is like as simple as like, media stories, etc. Like she talks about how, there's movies, etc., where, women are getting rescued, that's kind of thing. So that bridges off of that, what we were talking about there about survival. But the other thing that I thought was important to mention is, and she calls it the noisy room. And this really resonated with me too, because as I evolved in my career, and as I grew as a woman, the noisy room refers to being able to walk in and read the room. And that was my superpower. I mean, I could walk into a boardroom and I knew, often I was surrounded by men, but I could feel what was going on. If someone was thinking a certain way or acting a certain way, or the tone of voice was a certain way, that kind of thing, just always on this high alert, right? So, I think recognizing that all of these factors are happening to us in our bodies as well, that when we walk in, we're on this high alert. So it from there, it just begins that we have this fear of criticism. We want to be liked, we want to do a good job, and so we begin by being fearful of the criticism that just might come our way. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what's the impact of that? For me, I can say that I think that led to me almost being paralyzed sometimes in terms of taking any bold action, or in terms of suggesting something that might seem like a little risky or a little out of the box. And I think that's the playing small, which is obviously the opposite of the title of this book. But I think this fear that we have of the criticism and how hooked in we get to that fear is what really leads to a lot of women playing way smaller than they could be playing. And that in turn, for me anyway, and I'm curious to know whether you felt this or you've seen this in your practice, that led to me not feeling like I was living a life that was in alignment. And I didn't realize that until the last few years, but I'm not meant to play super small. It doesn't jive with like who I am, my personality. You're smiling because you know what I'm saying, but like, it just didn't feel good to me to be doing that all the time. And I think that was the main, the most damaging consequence for me of that criticism, the fact that I was not taking risks. I was afraid to go out and do things where I might fail or someone might criticize me or both.
Absolutely. And, and that's where, particularly when we're coaching, you see, you can hear it. You can hear it. A person will talk about, their dreams of doing, doing something, whatever it may be. And yet there's a yeah, but there's a, I have to wait until something, something else happens before I can actually do this. And often it just, this fear also of being, criticized. And so say you have someone that's in a role and, they have an idea of how things could be way better. They could go off on their own, and they could, I'm working with someone right now where this is the example, and they could go off on their own and they could start their own business and they could be making like big money, big money. But we're working through getting past that fear of, am I good enough? Is it possible for me to do this? Is it,
Right.
how am I going to manage? Like, will I make enough? All of the things that hold us back, the inner critic, when it's field ground for inner critic, right?
And talk about for a second, the thing that's like my Achilles heel, which is the whole don't get too big for your britches conversation that's happening in my head, like, as you know, as my coach, and I'm just being vulnerable here, but that conversation is happening in my head 24/7. Just talk about, because I don't think I'm alone in that. That's why I say,
well, I think the interesting thing about this, and I absolutely, I don't think anybody doesn't have this happen to them in some respects, Wendy. Like, it's more of I said that in my family, there was not a lot of praise. There was no praise. There just wasn't. It was just, I don't know if it was the era. I don't know, what it was, but there wasn't any praise. And, it was really a lot about, don't brag and don't be too big for your britches, because that's just not what we do. And that looks arrogant and, blah, blah, blah. And so, we got that message loud and clear as young women, young people, that's just not what you do. So you're hyper alert to any kind of criticism that kind of like, oh my goodness, are they doubting me, or what are they thinking about me? And did I do that right? And again, we go back to the noisy room. You go in and then you're inundated with like, okay, what's everybody thinking? What are they doing? But the genesis of it could start, as young. And so, yeah, what do we do about that? What do we need to do in order to dig a little bit deeper?
Well, the first question you asked me that was very, very helpful and very clarifying for me was, whose voice is that? And my response was, I knew exactly whose voice it was, and it wasn't mine. And it's interesting because I was just thinking about it as you were chatting, as after I said too big for your britches, I thought, I don't think I've ever used those words in actual conversation with anyone, not with my kids. Like, my kids have probably never heard me say, don't get too big for your britches. It's just not even an expression that I would use. And it is it's not a modern expression either, which, tells you a little bit about where it came from for me. It definitely came from my younger years. And then it just stays there, and it becomes this, if we repeat things enough times, you and I know this as coaches, like the more times we repeat the same thoughts to ourselves, the more likely that thought's going to become an assumption. And then eventually that assumption is going to become something that we see as the truth. And I think the most transformational part of this work that you do around criticism and praise is that you help people see that is just a story. And it may be the story that's been playing for a really long time. It may be the words you've been hearing for a really long time, but it's probably not even your voice. And if it's not serving you, then you get to try something else on for size, which is the work that I'm doing. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So how do we do it? how do we unhook from this? What are some of the things that we can do? If you've got somebody listening to this podcast, and I know there are going to be hundreds of people who listen to this who are like, oh yeah, that's me. Hands are up right now in the car, right?
Well, I just, I love the fact that we've had the opportunity, we're having the opportunity to chat about this. I'm far from the expert, right? But I am finding that it comes up all the time. So one of the things that you learn here is that feedback, and this is hard at first, right? It's, looking at feedback and so what is feedback? And I'm not just referring either to just, the explicit feedback of, you do X and this is the feedback that you get. So, it can be a number of things. It can be, putting an article out and, getting lots of praise, or putting the article out and getting nothing, just getting crickets. It could be getting the job, not getting the job. It can be, all of these different things are examples of where we get feedback. So we're just getting this information. And so one of the first principles that she talks about is, feedback is only tells you about the person that is giving you the feedback. It tells you nothing about yourself. It's not about you. And okay, so
stop. Say that one more time. This has been transformational for me. Like really accepting this, and I practice saying this to myself. Can you say that one more time?
So feedback doesn't tell you about you. It tells you about the person giving the feedback. Mm-hmm. And right off the bat, that sometimes this is hard to swallow, because you may be thinking automatically we go to lots of assumptions about the individual. We're trying to make meaning of it, and we're off to the races. We bring in every element of our noisy room, and we start to, and it's it really is like there's this narrative out there that if I listen to what this person is actually saying, then that means that I'm excusing it. And that's not what this is about. This is about simply taking a step back, being in your own power, mm-hmm. and looking at the facts of what the feedback was, and thinking about it. What was it? What's that person's, what's their perspective? What's their view on it? What's the, what is it that, what meaning is this for them? Those kind of things. And just simply looking at more the black and white of it. Mm-hmm. And then from there, saying, okay, is there anything in this feedback that is going to help me achieve my goal? Or is there anything in this feedback that I should take more of a look at, the black and white of it? And if no, then there's nothing else to be done. That's fine. And if it's yes, then it's more of, okay, well, I'm curious about, maybe I need more. What else is it that I need to understand here with this particular feedback? And do I need more information? And if I need more information, do I need to engage with them? That kind of thing. So it's just an opportunity for being able to take a step back and look at the feedback from this completely different perspective. But it's
really like neutralizing,
very much neutralizing it.
It's much more objective when you take it from that place. And one of the things as you were talking, I was thinking is that I think when we think of feedback, we are often just thinking of criticism, but this applies equally to praise. I was considering as I was listening to you, because, we get a lot of praise. I mean, the people who really love us are going to just layer it on, right? But another great thing, and I actually hadn't thought of this till right now, Lorna, so thank you. But I was thinking, we have a tendency when we get the praise to assume it means something, right? So it means I am good. I did a great job. I am whatever. But I think you have to take that with a grain of salt and get mm-hmm. objective and sort of neutralize that as well. Because again, whether it's criticism or it's praise, it's only a reflection of the person who's giving it, not of you. Mm-hmm. So if you ask yourself, well, what is this reflecting in terms of the person who's giving me this praise? the answer for me might be, well, it's my mom. Of course she's going to, of course she's going to tell me I did the best job ever and I'm excellent at this thing. So I think that's a helpful thing to keep in mind too, is, don't assume that the praise is saying something about you either. I mean, both of these things, right?
Yeah, and I think another good observation here is what's more important than to me than praise.
Right.
Remember what your priorities are, and that you don't have to, like, if you find yourself in a situation where you're, oh, I didn't get that praise, or what's going on there. Well, what's more important than that? What's, again, that kind of ability to take a step back and just, as we've talked before, hold it lightly and just see what, look at it from this, unhook from it, basically.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. And another way to think about it is, what's the point? What's the value of feedback for me? Why is it that I value feedback? Mm-hmm. And that's been helpful for me too, because, for example, one of the areas that you and I talk about in the coaching is the writing, because I mean, gosh, it's just like the best way to just get yourself, filleted and publicly flogged is to write something and put it out there. So as someone who is definitely hooked on the criticism and praise piece, it's terrifying for me to think about putting something out there publicly that I've written, even showing my writing to people who, I think are friendlies, is scary to me. And so it's been really helpful for me to think about, well, what is the value of feedback on my writing to me? Why is it that I even want to entertain the feedback, to hear the feedback, to get the feedback? And the truthful answer is, if I can unhook myself from the whole praise and criticism thing, the truthful answer is so that I can write better stuff. So that I can create something that actually is entertaining and enjoyable to the people, and that actually helps me get whatever the message is that I'm trying to get across, right? So if you can actually ask yourself that question, why does the feedback matter for me? What is the point of the feedback? I think that's a helpful starting place, because it leads to the next thing that you coached me through, which is this idea of, who do I need the feedback from? So who are the people that actually matter in this particular area of my life when it comes to the feedback? Do you want to talk about how people just sort of decide who matters when it comes to feedback and who?
Yeah, well, I'm going to take one step back just on the what you were talking about with the writing, because I thought this was just such a cool exercise that I had never done before. And that's, finding your favorite author on Amazon and then reading the reviews, right? And so I picked Brene Brown, and of course you're looking at, and, looking at the bad reviews and just, again, looking at it from, okay, well, that's just that one person's opinion, right? So, you have to ask me the question again, because now
that's okay. That is such a super helpful exercise. I've gone and done that on now since Lorna suggested it. I've gone and done it, and I think it's in Tara's book as well, this idea of going to do that. But done that on some of my favorite fiction authors, people who've literally won Pulitzers for their writing, and you go and you look at the feedback, and of course there's a huge chunk of it that's just incredibly negative and awful, and that's just part of putting anything out there. And it is really helpful to see. And of course, we all kind of know this, and I recognize that I'm maybe a little out there, a little more in the public eye than other people with the podcast and the other stuff that I do, but it still hurts like hell.
And I mean, as she said, women that are playing big will get criticized. Yeah. Right. So it is part of it. And so building ourselves, stepping in, again, I just keep saying, stepping into our own power and taking a step back from this is just a really wonderful way to take a look at it from that softer standpoint.
So the question I asked you that I'm going to go back to, the one that was kind of connected to this a little bit, was the idea of like figuring out, how do we figure out who the people are that matter when it comes to feedback about a particular area of our life or thing that we're doing. So for example, like my writing is a good example of that. Like, how do I, as someone who's trying to write a piece of nonfiction, I mean, a fiction, sorry, now it was nonfiction, fiction. How do I figure out whose feedback matters? Because I am, if I ever put this out there publicly in any way, going to get both positive praise and negative feedback, I'm sure. So how do I decide which of that is worth me spending some time on and doing those next steps you were talking about? Is there something for me to learn here? If so, do I need more information? All of that. How do I decide how to filter that?
Well, I think that would become, I mean, I'm just guessing here, but I'm going to say that it would become a skill in that, it's like anything, once you do it often enough, you become more skilled at looking at that review or listening to that critique and taking a step back and, what is this saying about the person that's giving the feedback? Yeah. What they're observing, what their beliefs are, what their understanding is. And then from there, following through with those other steps. Is there something in here? And I think, being very honest about that pursuit, like being genuine, that's the word I'm looking for, about that pursuit. So, when you get an email or maybe you're getting these book reviews, that's just looking at it from that perspective. And then what do I need to take? Because there will be gems in there that help you to say, oh, okay, well, maybe this is where I need to take my writing and angle it a little differently or whatever. Or how often do we say in life, oh, I never thought of it that way.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So absolutely. That's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because I'm in the process of writing something and it's super fun and I'm having a great time with it. But also, the only feedback that really matters to me is the feedback from the intended audience, the specific intended audience. It's the same thing with the podcast, right? Like, listen, there's so many people who would listen to this and probably think, oh, this is not for me. I'm not into any of this stuff, but that's okay because that person is not the intended audience for this. It's just like my book is intended for women in midlife who are struggling with a lot of the things that I've struggled with in midlife, who want to read a book that just kind of lifts them up and keeps them going and, is engaging and fun and all the rest of it and isn't too bloody serious. That's who it's for. So it's not for a serious literary critic. It's not for the people who create the short lists for the Booker Prize. It's not for any of those. It's not for men. It's not for, it's not for 20-year-olds. It's for this very specific demographic. And I think that's been really helpful to me too, because when I do receive feedback, I'm always filtering it through that. Is this a person whose feedback is actually relevant?
Yeah.
How can it, and if so, how can it help me?
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. How can I actually use this to do better and to feel better and, all the rest of that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I thought another interesting point about criticism and, in coaching, and I know that you use this too, but just looking at from the standpoint of, when criticism hurts, because it does, often it does, right? So this is one tool of just taking that step back and having that kind of, that's what we've been talking about. But there's also the, taking a deeper dive, and we do this in coaching about what are we making that criticism mean about ourselves, and what is the belief we have about ourselves that is underlying this. So in my case, this, not being smart enough, or, if I was out and trying to pitch something for some funding for a particular, cultural group, in my head, I'd be saying, well, you know absolutely nothing about this topic. I mean, how could you possibly even, that's the track that was going on there. And I needed to do a lot of work on the fact that, well, that's not true. I do know a lot of things, and I have an understanding of this topic in this particular way. So it's just important to, also realize, well, what is this mirroring back to me?
Right.
What is it triggering underneath this? And what am I going to do about that? And digging a bit deeper. So
Yeah. So it's not just about, is this piece of feedback true or relevant? It's, what am I making this piece of feedback mean? And is the thing that I'm making it mean based on something that's true or not? It's
exactly.
like taking it down one more level. And we coaches love to push you coachees on the truth of statements and what the evidence is to support the truths. And so I've been doing that with Lorna on a lot of these things. And, one of the things that comes up for me again and again is this whole, well, you're just going to be too big for your britches. That's my thing, that that underlying belief is that this will appear to be you thinking you're too big for your britches, or you being arrogant, or you taking more than your share, or you somehow playing too big, I guess, is the fear that I have there, and the story that is going on in my mind. So it's going to be different for everybody. But Lorna, in your experience coaching women around this, are there some common beliefs that you see that lead to this being hooked on criticism and praise?
Yeah, well, I think definitely the ones that we've talked about here, about not being smart enough, not being good enough, or as you said, being too big for your britches. It's those are the common ones that I see. Just simply just not being enough. And that's, therein lies what the fear is, and just keeping yourself small for the most part. That's the ones that I see the most. But what I love about outside of praise and criticism, what I love is when we can dig deeper into minimizing our inner critic voice, in the manner that we do. We learned that in training, and, personifying your inner critic and almost making it a little bit laughable, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, right. And
can we talk about that for 1 sec, Lorna?
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
Tell people what you're talking about there in terms of
So
how do you know it's the voice, and then what do you do?
It's the voice. Yeah, it's the loop. It's the voice that just continues to just beak off, and whenever you're doing basically anything where you're maybe outside of your comfort zone. And when I first learned about the inner critic, first of all, I can remember sitting in class during the training years ago and thinking, and I'm serious about this, Wendy, this is exactly what happened. In my head, I'm going, oh my goodness, other people have this voice. I seriously thought I was the only one. I thought I was just this weirdo that had this inner critic voice that was, always going off, right? So I went on this journey of learning more about my own inner critic, and sure, I mean, she comes out where, I call her Cruella. And she's mean. And there's lots of ways in coaching that we tease out who your inner critic voice is, but it's the one that's trying to keep you small. But the other angle on this that I've come to understand is it's also trying to keep you safe. Right.
Yeah.
It's trying to keep you from embarrassing yourself, or making the wrong decision, or there's a million different things that it's trying to do. And this also goes back to where we begin, right?
Sure.
Right. But today it's now just kind of on, it's too loud. And so in the work that we do in coaching, it's looking at that inner critic voice, trying to understand where it's coming from. Is it male? Is it female? And not attaching it to like, it's my mom or it's my dad or whatever. Right. I mean, they've got elements of that there, but it really is that voice that is trying to keep you safe or trying to keep you small. So that's one part of it. But the other side is also then looking at your inner self, your future self, your inner mentor, and all of the gifts that we've got inside of us, and the strength that we really do have. And in coaching, watching a client reconnect with that and realize, yes, I have done hard things. I've excelled in lots of different ways. And you just open up that door for them to be their authentic self. And it's so beautiful of an experience to be there with them when that's happening. And you can see that interaction of, the looking at inner critic and then discovering and reconnecting with your inner mentor helps us now have a different lens to look at praise and criticism.
Totally.
Now we're in that place of power. We're in that place of strength, so yeah,
it's really, really transformative. And I've done this before, and then I did it again with Lorna, this work on inner critic and on inner mentor, future self. And it's work that I do with my clients, but it's hard to do on yourself. You kind of need someone to guide you through it, which is again why I'm working with a coach. But it was interesting. My inner critic is, I don't know her name, but it's Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada. That was so not dissimilar looking to Cruella. In fact,
I know.
I think actually play Cruella. Maybe she was.
I think she might have.
Anyway,
yeah.
I love Meryl Streep, but she's also very good at playing like the mean girl. And so that was my inner critic. And I just took a client this morning through a future self exercise, and it never fails to amaze me how emotional that is for every person who does it. There are almost always tears, not sad tears of like just the outward expression of the inward like magnitude of emotion that comes with realizing, oh my gosh, this person is still there. I can rely on them. They do know what's best for me. They do know everything's going to be okay. They are able to provide me with a safe space where I can land. And it's just so powerful. And it's a tool that I've been using since we did the exercise again, Lorna. It's something that I think about all the time, and especially find it helpful once I've done that exercise to ask myself, what would that person tell me to do right now?
Yeah. And I think also when we're coaching women from any place that they come to us, whether it be they're just stuck in career, they're stuck in their lives in whatever manner, but particularly, some of the clients that we've got that about becoming alcohol free, reconnecting with like minimizing that inner critic and maximizing and coming back to self and who you truly are. There's such a strength there too, right? In looking at yourself and realizing, I can do this. I do have the resource to do this. I've been doing it before. So it's helpful. It's a tool, and it's an honor when I've had the experience too, where you're sitting with a client and you can just see the light go back on almost, right? And what a gift because then you can move from there. Yeah.
For so many clients, the only voice they know is the inner critic.
Yeah.
And so being able to say, no, there's someone else you have a relationship with. You can choose this relationship over that one. You can go to this place. Like, as corny as that sounds, it's incredibly powerful for women to be reminded of that, to remind themselves of that. And if we're talking about alcohol use or any other unhealthy coping mechanism that women might be overusing as a result of excess stress or overwhelm or trauma, I think recognizing, and this is really a cool moment too, when the light bulb kind of goes on for women, they realize, oh my gosh, this habit is keeping me from this person.
Yes,
it's making
absolutely.
them, right? Yeah. It's such a cool moment. Yeah.
And then the, I'll talk to clients too about, okay, so now over the next number of weeks, like, what would she say? What would she like? Just play with this, like constantly ask yourself, okay, what would she do today? What would she say today? And just again, to have that inner knowing and that inner voice sort of be more resonant and present. So
it's really, really cool. I mean, almost always the voice that I hear is the sentiment that I hear, and I was saying this to my client this morning, is some version of everything's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be just
Yeah.
fine. And like, there's nothing more calming than that when you're spinning out
Yeah.
because of criticism. Maybe it's because of criticism or feedback, or maybe it's because of something else that's happened in your life that feels really stressful. There's nothing nicer than to hear a voice that you trust say, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you want to do this cool work, Lorna's the woman to work with. I work with her. She's amazing. I just, I do this obviously in my practice as well, but Lorna really has a very focused program where she works on these things we've been talking about today, the inner critic, your sort of genuine, authentic self, or your inner mentor, or your future self. We use all of those words. And then this whole concept of where did this reliance on praise come from? And this, sort of, I'm using the word unhealthy just to say it's not serving me. This hooking on to criticism that I have. Where did it come from? And how can I change that? Because this is something we talk about a lot on this podcast, especially when I have coach guests on. I mean, the basic underlying fundamental premise of all coaching, no matter what your training is if you don't like it, if it doesn't feel good, you get to change it. And so this is the work that I've been doing with Lorna, and I just wanted to bring her onto this podcast and share her very awesome wisdom with you guys, and have her help me explain this topic. And hopefully this resonated with many of you who are listening to this podcast. And if you want to explore this more, I would ask myself this question. This is a really good question to ask yourself, is like, what would be available to me if I could silence my inner critic? What would be available to me if I could unhook myself from criticism and praise, and I could actually start playing bigger? What are the things that I am not allowing myself to access and enjoy, and allowing other people to then benefit from, as a result of how caught up I am in what other people think? And if the answer is, like it was for me, potentially something really cool, then coaching on this topic is so worth it. So Lorna, on that note, where can people find out more about you? What's your website again, please?
It is lornawilsoncoaching.com.
Amazing.
Very simple, straightforward.
It is. And I'll put that obviously in the show notes, as I always do. And so
you.
if you're interested in finding out more about Lorna, you can go and check her out there. And Lorna, is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to cover today?
No, I don't think so. I think it's been a really awesome conversation. Thank you so much so you and I just had a conversation one day about all of this, and then suddenly here we are on a podcast.
Well, I just thought, if
who knew?
If it's this transformative for me, I mean, always, if there's something that I'm doing that's working for me, that's helping me, then I always want to share it with as many people as I can. So Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
Lovely guest and agreeing to come on today. And I have a feeling maybe I'm going to ask you to come back to talk about the inner mentor stuff some more, because I think that would be a cool podcast episode on its own. So thank you, Lorna.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a burnout and balance coach, I help busy high achievers like you create a more balanced, joyful life. Ready to create a life you don't want to escape from? Download your free Blueprint for Change now. This incredible workbook includes some of my favorite coaching tools and will help you get clear on what you need more and less of in your life. Grab it at www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint. That's www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint.